Gracias. Buenas noches. First, I want to express my deep gratitude to President Sheinbaum and the Morena Parliamentary Group for hosting us, for showing us so much hospitality in your beautiful city, your love of this place, of the city, of this country, and your joy and pride in all that you have accomplished is infectious. We're a little jealous. It is also such an honor to share the stage with the great Alvaro Garcia Linera. I have learned so much from you over the years, and soon we will be hearing from the mayor herself. I'm so grateful to the organizers of the Panamerican Congress, especially David Adler and Giorgio Jackson. This is, as you've heard, a celebration of an emergent solidarity that stretches from Nunavut to Tierra del Fuego. And this forum to share ideas and strategies across our national context arrives just in time, because we have never needed to strengthen the long progressive tradition of internationalism more than in this moment. And I say this for several reasons. Now, I think the first is obvious. The current government of the country with the largest economy and the largest military in the world is attacking each one of our countries in different ways and one at a time. Trump likes to play the mafia boss, and he uses trade and tariff threats not only as a weapon, but also, as we've seen, as a bribe. He turns some countries into concentration camps, others into his mining colonies. Some, like mine, he simply threatens with annexation. And all the while, he terrorizes and immiserates his own people, all to further enrich a small group of oligarchs bent on replacing humans with robots and powering the whole enterprise with fossil fuels that will incinerate our collective home. To this audience, it goes without saying that Washington has a long and bloody history of waging war on the countries of the Americas, using the tools of both tanks and banks, both torture and trade. The reason so many are this vulnerable to US trade wars and trade threats is precisely because the United States used those neocolonial colonies to keep the nations of the Americas dependent on raw resource exports and low-wage labor rather than diversifying their own economies and developing as they wished. So this is not new. Still, I think Trump marks a new phase. In the past, there was a facade. The CIA and the School of the Americas hid in the shadows. The IMF, World Bank, and the so-called free trade deals claimed to be advancing growth-led development that would benefit the whole world. Now, the mask is off. There is not even a pretense that this is about anything other than benefiting the United States, by which Trump means himself and his donors. And there is nothing clandestine about it. It's done out in the open, announced in all caps on Trump's own social media platform, just one of the ways that he directly and defiantly profits from the presidency. In the face of these attacks, every one of our nations, even the largest and wealthiest among them, is at a great disadvantage. That said, so many of us around the world are immensely grateful to President Lula da Silva, who has shown so much courage in the face of Trump's outrageous interference in Brazil's sovereignty and Brazil's right to prosecute Bolsonaro for involvement in an attempted coup d'etat, which, by the way, is exactly what the US Congress should have done to Trump. Now, we also cheer and share viral clips of your President Sheinbaum as she meets Trump's attacks with seemingly bottomless dignity and strength. But these leaders need backup from the rest of the countries that Trump is bullying. Unfortunately, many have given up far too easily. The EU just gave Trump a tariff victory it had no right to concede, violating many of its stated values, including its climate commitments. For those of you who missed this, the European Union agreed to buy a huge amount of US gas and oil. Now, I regret to report that my own country, Canada, is also failing the Trump test. After winning an election promising to stand up for our sovereignty and the values that make us different from the United States, our new banker prime minister immediately capitulated on nearly every front. He is following Trump's commands on increased military spending money on bombs that we should be spending on health care and caring for one another. He killed an important plan to tax the big tech companies that have poisoned our media ecology, and he is also trashing Canada's climate commitments, scrapping carbon pricing, and ramming through major extractive projects that make a mockery of Canada's promises to respect the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Now, not all of this is happening because of Trump. Trump, in fact, is just the excuse to do what our own oligarchs wanted all along. And our prime minister harnessed the shock of Trump's annexation and tariff threats to push through their pre-existing wish list, a very common and tired tactic that some of you know I have called the shock doctrine. So, my friends, we are here because we know that there are other ways to meet this crisis, much better ways. Ways rooted in collaboration, in cooperation, in careful coordination, rather than waiting for Trump to pick us off one by one. So what might this mean? It's not a secret. In each of our nations, we know what the US wants most from us. Perhaps it is lithium, perhaps it's copper or coffee. Maybe it's fresh produce or water or electricity generation. Maybe it's car parts or access to ports and canals. Whatever it is, I believe that it is time for all of us in the Americas and around the world to find those points of greatest leverage, our levers, and make it absolutely clear that if these outrageous attacks continue, we are willing to pull them, not one at a time, which makes us vulnerable to isolation and even worse counter threats, but all at once. Wasn't it Nixon who said of Allende's Chile, "Make the economy scream"? Two can play at that game. Then let's see who knows more about the art of the deal. This, after all, is what the rich history of trade unionism teaches us. No boss, no matter how wealthy and powerful, can get anything done without his or her workers who have the power to withdraw their labor. This is the tactic through which the left has won its greatest victories, from the 5-day work week to national health care, and it has overthrown dictators and even abolished slavery before. As the left, we know the power of solidarity in the face of bullying. We are experts in how to deploy collective power in the face of concentrated wealth. And there is enormous power in this room, enormous power in the Panamerican Congress, which has convened 60 elected legislators from 12 countries from South, Central, and North America. I believe it's time to map that power, organize it, and if Trump refuses to stop violating our sovereignty, breaking the US's own rules, it is time to deploy it. I want to be clear that this is not a threat against the hardworking people of the United States. It's the opposite. No one benefits more than them when their would-be dictator, their want-to-be king, is revealed to be a paper tiger. Our solidarity extends to everyone in the United States who deserves so much better, especially those who have been in the streets holding No Kings protests and who have organized to stop ICE, the immigration police, from entering their neighborhoods, schools, and workplaces to disappear people. And it extends to the brave members of the US Congress who are here this week in Mexico, showing us what it means to not just be anti-Trump, but to try to transform the whole broken system that made Trump possible. These are some of my personal heroes. So there's a second reason that we are called to new levels of international cooperation. And it goes well beyond one man and one government. Though Trump is indeed a threat to us all. He is, however, only the most visible manifestation of a far-right political project that has national expressions in all of our countries. It's a project backed by the wealthiest tech and fossil fuel companies on the planet, as well as some of the largest and fastest growing fundamentalist religious orders. It's a project that has weaponized the most violent and apocalyptic passages in the Bible, Old and New Testament, and combined them with the most potent tools of digital misinformation to spread fear and division. Fear that justifies placing nations in constant state of emergency, waging war on migrants, on gangs, on woke, anything to justify ever-escalating repression, criminalization, and incarceration. So part of the reason we must deepen our relationships and our ties is that this far-right project I'm describing is also highly networked across the Americas and indeed around the world. We see it in Argentina, we see it in Ecuador and El Salvador. We see it in Brazil, where it is threatening to return. The men, and they're almost all men, who lead these movements trade chainsaws with each other, swap anti-woke messaging with each other, open their dungeons to one another, disappear prisoners for each other, cover up crimes for one another, enrich each other's families by buying into each other's crypto scams. When the leaders of these movements witness Israel's atrocities, they do not see the horrors of genocide that we see. They see inspiration for the fortress, supremacist ethno-states they themselves would like to create at home. Around the world, these far-right figures call themselves nationalists. They wrap themselves in their respective flags. But I don't think we should be fooled. Whether it's Milei or Meloni, Netanyahu or Noboa, Bukele or Bolsonaro, or even Trump himself, these figures are primarily loyal to money, to class, at times to their ethnic group, and always to a hyper-masculine idea of strength and aggression. Out of its many contradictions, a new ideology is emerging, one I have begun to call, with my colleague Astra Taylor, end times fascism. So what do we mean by this? Let's look at Trump once again. His coalition, on its surface, is a bit strange. It brings together workers who can't afford groceries with tech oligarchs worth hundreds of billions of dollars. It brings together evangelicals with podcast bros, wellness entrepreneurs with hardcore Zionists. So what unites this motley crew? What holds them together? Well, we've started to notice that running through this odd coalition is a deep belief that some kind of end is coming, some kind of final battle. And the good people, the chosen people, are going to ascend. They're going to ascend to a better place. But in the meantime, you'd better prepare, bunker up, get ready for some kind of Armageddon. So sometimes this is very literal. Take Mike Huckabee, the US ambassador to Israel. You may have noticed that he just went to Gaza, inspected the killing fields they call humanitarian aid, and declared it a smashing success. The reports failed to mention that Huckabee, like other powerful people in Trump's team, including his Minister of Defense, believe in a form of religious fundamentalism known as Christian Zionism. People who are Christian Zionists believe the end times are near, that the Messiah will soon return and take them up to a celestial city in the sky, in the rapture. But first, the Israelites need to gain total control over the Holy Land, or so they believe. So when Israel uses annihilatory violence to take over Gaza and does the same, only slower, in the West Bank, they do not see this as illegal atrocities. They see exciting and felicitous evidence that the long-awaited rapture, the elevator to the sky, is getting nearer. Now, I've long been interested in this story, this biblical story, which is actually a once marginal interpretation of biblical text. There's by no means a consensus that this is actually what the Bible says. But what interests me is the way it bears this striking resemblance for what capitalism is producing down here on earth. No divine intervention required. The golden gated cities for the rich, with privatized everything, including security and disaster response, and mayhem for the rest. But this dream of escape has gotten a lot more literal in recent years. We know the billionaires are prepping with luxury bunkers in Hawaii and New Zealand, Some are even trying to buy and build an entirely private city-state in Honduras. They call it Prospera. They're being taken to court. Like the religious extremists, they also dream of transcendence from the earthly realm. They dream of having their consciousnesses uploaded to the AI singularity, or of boarding their spaceships to Mars. They take it for granted that the earth will become unlivable, much like those end times religious fanatics racked by violence and scarcity. Unfortunately, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy because they are also pouring fuel on the flames. These assumptions about the end times are not limited to very religious people or the very rich. I've spent, unfortunately, hundreds of hours listening to Steve Bannon's podcast for a whole other project I did. And I was really struck that almost all the ads, all the advertisements, and there are a lot of advertisements, are for survivalist gear, ready to eat meals that you can survive on for 90 days, or tips on buying gold because the US economy is going to crash. The assumption of all of it is that it's all going down. I think we see a similar mentality, a similar set of assumptions in the way the largest powers, including the United States, but not only the United States, are dividing up the globe, stockpiling critical minerals and water and energy while hardening and fortressing their own borders. On the surface, it looks like old-school colonialism when Trump threatens Canada and Greenland and Panama, and in a way it is. But I think they're also preparing for this crash. They're stockpiling for the disasters they know are coming, pulling resources into the fortress and locking out the poor. Which, once again, is why Israel is such an inspiration. The ethno-state protected by its Iron Dome with absolutely no plans for peace. In our age of escalating disasters, it seems that the governing ideology of the far right has become a monstrous supremacist survivalism. Now, there are deep tensions within this far-right coalition. We've seen it. We've seen Trump fight with Musk and Bannon and so on, and all the Epstein fissures. There are plenty of things on which they disagree. But my argument to you today is that we need to pay attention to this very unsettling things that these really powerful parts of the coalition seem to agree on. The idea that our one and only world is coming to an end. Some see the end in that manifestation of biblical prophecy. Some see it in the human-made Armageddon sparked by climate chaos or nuclear war. Some see an existential threat posed by immigration, feminism, trans rights, and cultural replacement. But it's all tinged with this idea of apocalypse. Whatever is driving this perceived collapse, end times fascists are determined to be among the chosen few who survive, safely ensconced in their bunkers or behind fortress borders or raptured up to heaven. Now, fascism has always had an apocalyptic quality to it, what Umberto Eco referred to as its Armageddon complex. But the fascists of the 1930s in Europe and the fascism that came to large parts of Latin America in the 1970s both had a future horizon. They seemed to genuinely believe that after the cleansing violence that they were unleashing, there would be a return to stability and peace. The fascism that is rising today in the US and around the world has no such horizon. Yes, there are thin appeals to 1950s nostalgia or a promise of individual financial freedom by investing in crypto, but the whole project is shot through with the planetary scale apocalyptic conviction that I've been describing. In this future it foresees, which is very much under construction, the wrenching privatization and austerity of past capitalist stages create huge opportunities for corporate actors, old and new, because it's private companies that are building the prisons and the concentration camps. It's private tech companies surveilling populations and selling security and automated weapons to the rich. It's other companies offering rescue from ecological and military crises for a price. even privatizing so-called humanitarian aid during a genocide, as we are seeing with such nightmarish consequences in Gaza. Alexander Karp, the CEO of Palantir, told his shareholders recently, and this is a quote, "This," referring to Palantir, "is a company built for bad times." Bad times means strong finances internally. Bad times are very good for Palantir because we build products that are robust, that are built for danger. So what makes this different from the disaster capitalism that I first wrote about exactly 20 years ago is that Palantir is not foreseeing stable, peaceful times punctuated by periodic shocks and disasters. It's foreseeing only bad times, which, as Karp explains, is a great business proposition, steady profits. Leonard Cohen, one of Canada's best exports, I might say, put it well, "I see the future, brother. It is murder." It should be no surprise that capitalism has taken us to this place. There were so many warnings. The first International Climate Summit took place in the late 1980s in Montreal. The Earth Summit in Rio was soon after. The threat was perfectly clear back then. When those with wealth and power did not listen for decade after decade, all the while doubling down on the policies of extraction, economic immiseration, and militarism, eventually you arrive at the future so long foretold, and that is where we are. But the thing is, capitalism still needs growth, and new bubbles provide that growth. Some are in security, but the really big bubble is in AI. AI is delivering massive profits. Just today, we learned that Microsoft will soon be worth $4 trillion, thanks largely to its relationship with OpenAI. But here is the thing that we need to focus on about AI. It feeds off of the living world, off of us, off of our creativity, off of everything we have put into it that trains it, but also all of our ecological systems. It is literally a vampiric, a vampire technology. It feeds off of energy, massive amounts of it. That means fossil fuels, because the other technologies, they say, aren't ready, and it feeds off water. It is unquenchable. That is why the tech companies, so eager to paint themselves as green just a couple of years ago, have actually quietly killed off pretty much all of their net zero pledges that were non-binding, and they now stand so eagerly with Trump. What they are doing is knowingly sacrificing the living, breathing, animate world to build their sterile, glitchy machine gods. That is an extraordinary act of planetary arson. So we must be very clear about who we are up against. We are up against traitors. And I'm not a nationalist, so I don't use that term. I'm not talking about traitors to nation. I'm talking about traitors to creation. They are treasonous to the wonders and beauty of this world. They are willing to let it all burn because for them, paradise lies elsewhere, up in the digital cloud or on Mars. Which brings me to the most important reason for progressive movements and legislators to come together and collectivize our power in this critical moment. We have to stop these maniacs. We and left movements from around the world are the only people who can stop them. And we will not do it merely by blocking their worst ideas and standing up to Trump, though we must do that. We will do it by proposing an intoxicating and irresistible alternative to it. We just saw a taste of this in New York City. I don't know, did any of you follow the campaign of Zoran Mamdani? You know, Zoran ran this amazing campaign. I talked to him in November. A friend asked me to talk to him. They said, you know, he doesn't have a chance. His name recognition was at 1% back then. And he, beat the former governor of New York in the Democratic Party primaries by running this remarkable campaign that combined left economic populism, right, addressing people's real economic concerns, going to people who voted for Trump, right, in Black and brown communities who were upset about crime, who had successfully been pitted against new immigrants, even though many were immigrants themselves. Because this is what neoliberalism has produced. It has produced, as Walter Benjamin told us, wreckage upon wreckage. And people are now in the wreckage, right? And there's such a sense of scarcity that it's very easy to pit people against each other. And while some corporate Democrats respond to that by going, oh, well, we need to be anti-immigrant too, the people want it. Zoran Mamdani did something different. He said, no, we need to raise the floor so that people feel more stable. And so he ran on policies like free and fast buses, universal accessible childcare, freezing the rent, municipally owned grocery stores that would prevent price gouging, actually meeting people's real needs. And it worked like magic, because the other thing he did was he helped New Yorkers fall back in love with their city, with their beautifully diverse city. You know, fascists hate New York for a reason, because it is such a diverse city. And the whole campaign, and those of you who saw the videos, you know they were a celebration of diverse language and culture and food. And people remembered that they love it here, unlike those billionaires who are constantly threatening to leave, right? And I think that that is, you know, a friend of mine, part of a group called Jews for Zoran, fighting the Islamophobic smears. They sent me a text the day before the election explaining why they were so excited about Zoran's candidacy and why they had knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors, if not thousands. This was what the text said: we want to stay in our city, we want to stay on our planet, we love it here. So what do you think about that as a unifying, a unifying coalition for the left we need? We love it here. We will make it better. We will make it fairer, we will make it more alive, and we will not let them burn it. Thank you.